Guten Tag, ich bin Richard Metzelfan here, bringing you guys an old school album review. And today we're going to be looking into this album's 20th anniversary, and it's from one of the best bands as part of the Big Four, the Teutonic thrash metal scene, or the German thrash metal scene. And as you can see by the title, we're going to be talking about M16 by Sodom, the band's 10th full length album released on October 22nd, 2001 through Steam Hammer Records. Now, this follows up their previous album, Code Red, which is another one of Sodom's best albums. But going from that to M16, from what I've heard, this is, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably their first and so I think only concept album about the Vietnam War, and the title M16 is named after the rifle that a lot of the U.S. soldiers used during that time. Um, and like I said, Sodom, in my opinion, are one of the most underrated bands of the Teutonic thrash metal scene. In my opinion, they're up there, part of the scene along with Creator, or Destruction and Tankard. And a lot of like the German metal scene or the thrash metal scenes, like they originally had like hints of black metal a little bit the first wave, but then later evolving for that with more thrash metal. And production wise, this is great, produced by Harris Johns, does a great job. Let's just talk about like the vocals from Tom Angel Ripper. Tom does a really great job on the vocals. Like, he just has that sick, like thrash like vocals. The guitars on this album are great from Bernd Kost. Bernd does a great job with the guitar work. The bass on this album is pretty audible. Tom definitely stepped it up. And the drumming from Bobby Shadowiski. I probably butchered his last name, but the drums are fucking great. So, without further ado, let's dive into this album track by track. Now, starting things off is Among the Weird Kong, which starts off with some very military-like drumming and intense thrashing beats, which then explodes into some really techy style riffing along with the groovy mid-tempo pace with commanding vocals that just keeps the whole vibe very powerful, and it just has a very fiery solo section upon just like full blasting and just violent old school sounding riffs. And it leaves like no doubt that what you're gonna expect for the rest of this album, which then leads to the next song, which is called I Am the War. Now it starts off with some blasting drumming that gives way with a very up-tempo pace with some very vicious riffs, pounding drumming, and an oppressive atmosphere with full-on instrumental interlude that ups sort of like the thrash scale immensely with wild, sparkling solo and frantic riffing. Then it becomes like one of the band's better tracks. It gives hints of like what's to expect even more. Scary, excuse me. Anyway, next song on the album is called Napalm in the Morning. Offers a restrained like melodic build with some simplistic drummings and a rolling guitar riff, and it's sort of like a great chugging pace with atmospheric leads, blaring bass, and just pounding drums, which just pick up some energy midway through, but it still remains that powerful slow effort that the band has to change things up a little bit, and it has a harsh thrash tone and presence to their sound. Next song on the album is called Mind Jumper, has some very blaring drumming, rolling guitars, and blasting double bass that just fills up quickly, and it adds sort of like a sense of urgency to like the full scale thrash riffs upon like the tempo pattern with numerous tempo shifts from frantic to intense to slightly less intense. Hence, Genocide. Now, Genocide, as despite is like a heavy mid-tempo chugging guitars with some pounding drummings along with a simple brutal pattern that upon the main riff, which works a lot of nicely with a lot of like technical variations. It never gets the energy going until like the double bass blast in the middle section. So this is pretty much where the album kind of like slightly dips, but not to say it doesn't like fall flat on its face. But I just feel like it just leaves little energy compared to like what's more to expect so far. Moving on to Little Boy. Now this song is full of hard charging guitars with a solid drum pattern as a highlight and a mid-tempo pace with pounding double bass blast beats throughout the first half with some energetic whips of riffing that creates a heavy framework for the chaotic mix session with fiery guitars, blasting drums, and a far more brutal pattern variation. And it has a really good extended instrumental interludes, which offers more chaos among like the thrash with the brutal, chaotic finale, and it makes it a really great song with sort of like the chaotic tactics and the thrash bass attacks. Then we move on to the title track of the album, M16. Now this song offers like atmospheric riffing and a mid-tempo drum pattern loaded with some chugging riffs, and it just keeps the pace up with some really great technical solo, which leads with some sick drumming and ferocious like riffs that just takes you back to the chugging pace for the remainder of that last half of the song. Lead injection. Now this song goes from the plodding drumming thing and a stiff frantic guitar pattern throughout out is just, I don't know, it's just a fucking great song. It has some very mid-tempo work that just works really well with the drums, and just a very technical song and very frantic all throughout. Cannon fodder. Now this pretty much bleeds into from lead injection with some razor riffing and just some one of the most unrelenting riff work and technical patterns with some pounding drumming and a scorching pace with some really sick bass lines through that varied shifts between like the razor like riffs to the more mid-tempo stuff. It's just sick. Anyway, moving on to Marines. Now Marines offers some haunting guitars with a simple drum pattern with some spacious mid-tempo chugging guitars with some everything. It's just similar to Cannon Fodder. It just, Marines is another great song. And then we close things out with a very interesting song, which is Surfin' Bird, originally done by the band The Trashmen. And it's a very wild cover, just plenty of energy, and just a full pounding drumming and just blaring bass work. It's just some Sarah Scott vocals, and it's just a funny way to end this album. Every time I hear it, I always think of that episode of Family Guy where Peter Griffin's last thing, oh, we have a bird, but bird's a word. But I love how Sodom just takes it and makes it like their own in a way. So yeah, overall, M16 by Sodom, really great, good work into their discography. So I'd give this album a score. I'm going to give this album a solid 9 out of 10. They're really great, and I really wish they would come and tour in the US. I would love to see these guys. So yeah, that's my review of M16 by Sodom, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the album, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal. Dankeschön.